is happening? And I hope you've been having a fantastic week. It's been busy but good for myself. So glad to be back with you all on this here Taco Tuesday. Again, I hope you've been having a fantastic week. I'm excited about being back here with the gang, the Soul family. I appreciate you as always. What am I looking for? I feel like I'm a little disoriented today. A good week, but if my head wasn't attached to my body, I'd probably misplace it. I wouldn't lose it, but I'd misplace it. So, again, welcome. This is, let me check everything to make sure it's working the way I need it to. And it looks to be, so we're going to keep the party going. So, welcome. If this is your first time here, this is Soul Swami Live. And what we do here is discuss healing in all its various formats to become the best version of ourselves. It's basically to help us, the evolution of us becoming the best version of ourselves mentally, physically, spiritually, and emotionally. We do this to create a collective energy to remind us that we are not alone. Healing is a communal process. So we need a community to be able to support us evolving into better versions of ourselves. And here we put all our energy together to create that community to support us evolving and healing. We do shows every Tuesday and Thursday. So Tuesday is this show, which is all around healing. Thursday is our book club, but I think book club is going to be evolving into something else. I don't know. Just as we grow, the sessions and the work we do grows as well. So we're going to do a little bit of revamp and revitalization of our Thursday night show. But we have shows every Tuesday and Thursday at 7 p.m. Eastern. And you can find us on Twitch, YouTube, Facebook, and Instagram. Those are where you'll find us. I'm on every platform, but the live show can be viewed from those platforms. And as a reminder, don't forget, you can always hit the link that is in the description or somewhere in the chat to join the live to be able to get an energy reading, a live energy reading for yourself, right? Respectful, mindful of the vulnerability and how exposed you can be. So it's safe space for that to be able to help you identify some of the energies that are interacting with your life. Generally, every week we do a little bit of energy work, and this week we are on our crown, which resides right above your head, right? So the crown is the energy point for your consciousness, your sacred knowledge, and your spiritual connection, right? So your consciousness, your sacred knowledge, and your spiritual connection. If you are into, if you are into color therapy, the color for your crown is violet. So wear some violet clothes, eat some violet food, spend some time in violet colored light. Hence what we got going on here, a little bit of light therapy. If you are into aromatherapy and essential oils, you want to think frankincense, rosewood, myrrh, Sandalwood, lavender are all very good scents for igniting the energy of your crown. If you are into crystals and gemstones, you want to think selenite, amethyst, one of my babies. Amethyst, moonstone, diamond are more than just a girl's best friend. And clear quartz are also good for activating the energy of your crown. So the next thing we do during our show, it's a little bit of sound therapy. Then we do some breath work and we do some affirmations. So over the last week or so, I wound up purchasing. As a matter of fact, if you were in the last show, they came towards the end of the show. But I wound up purchasing a full set of crystal singing bowls. We will not be using the full set tonight because we're focusing on our crown. But I did bring a couple of them to help with establishing the sound healing. So during this time, all you really have to do is just relax. Allow the vibrations to resonate in your spirit and help you clear your energy of the stresses of the day and set an energy for sharing, communal healing, and all those things that we need as we evolve to be the best version of ourselves, right? So again, all you got to do during this time is just relax and listen to the sounds. Oh shoot. I know y'all heard, but it felt like something was in the man, listen. Easy though. Okay, family. Next thing we do is a little bit of breath work. This week, I think we want to do 478. If you are unfamiliar with the breath work, the numbers tell you how long to inhale, 4, how long to hold your breath, and how long to exhale. But during this time, all you really have to do is just listen to the sound of my voice as I guide us through the breath work. During this time, relax and be mindful of the thoughts that come to your mind as you are doing this breath work. Make sure you are consciously, with pure intentions, ridding yourself with the stresses of the day so that you can relax and receive whatever you need to receive from tonight's episode and give whatever you need to give to tonight's episode. Again, we're going to do 478, and you listen to the sound of my voice as I guide us through 478. On the count of 3, we will start. 1, 2, 3. Breathe in 4, 2, 3, 4. Hold 7, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Release 8, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Breathe in 4, 2, 3, 4. Hold 7, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Release 8, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Last time, family. Breathe in 4, 2, 3, 4. Hold 7, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Release 8, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Now, the next thing we'll do is affirmations. I want you to add these affirmations to your routine when your thoughts seem out of place or you're feeling disconnected spiritually and just kind of out of balance with your thoughts. You want to use these affirmations to activate the energy of your crown. And repeat after me. I am divine. I am connected to the universe. I am at peace. I am a spiritual being. I release doubt and welcome faith. I am divine. I am connected to the universe. I am at peace. I am a spiritual being, and I release doubt and welcome faith. All right, family. Let's get the show in gear. So, first, I kind of want to talk about something, and it's kind of ironic. It's the synchronicity of life, really. So, I believe Mercury is in retrograde right now, right? And to me, it seems as though it's one of the shorter retrogrades that Mercury can be in. But for me, one of the things that I've noticed is some of the things that I've asked for, or some of the things that I've wanted, some of the things that I've tried to manifest in my life, I've had to be patient for and wait for those things to come to fruition. And ironically, I notice, because I try to be self aware, that some of these things are coming to fruition. And it's starting with the small things, right? One of the reasons I'm having this conversation with you and talking about these things is because as humans, we have a tendency to just get lost in the grandeur, the big examples, the large things that shape our lives and our experience in our lives. But a lot of times, those little things add up and can be just as life changing and just as altering and just as important as the larger things if we see the value in these small moments or these small gestures to remind us of our connectedness and our greatness in this world, right? So for me, it's been random, it's been wild. So over the last year, literally, we didn't do book club last Thursday because this is what happened. Over the last year, it has been wild as it relates to my job, right? We've been in this conflict with, contract conflict, contract negotiation, and something like that. And it's just been wild where the government shut down in October, so I didn't work that much then. And then December, they told us that there'd be a lapse in the contract that would only last 4 weeks that wound up lasting 2 months. So for October, most of October, I wasn't working. And then at the start of the year, we were out of work for another 2 months. And for me, generally in these moments, my survival ego will kick in. And it's funny because we're assessing survival ego right now. Generally, when things like this happen in my life, my survival ego will kick in. And I start moving to address the problems, but making fear-based decisions, right? So this time, it's been a practice in the work that we have done. I didn't want to send mixed signals. We talked about sending mixed signals to the universe and how that's stopping some of our manifestations or some of the things that we want to attract in our lives. And for me, I wanted to make sure that I'm in a space where I'm no longer sending these mixed signals. If I believe in abundance, I want to live with the faith and understanding that abundance is a part of my world and not fearful based on some of these things that I have no control over. So, job was going crazy, and for me, I was keeping faith that we'd get the contract back and keeping hope through this process that we'd get the contract back. And then Thursday, they told us after a year of uncertainty, stress, and worry that we won the negotiation, the appeal, and we got our contract right? So that was one thing that came to fruition. I'm like, okay, that's good. I was so happy because that was a major stressor in my life that I was trying to navigate and not be as stressed as it can get me. So that was good, right? And then the other thing wound up being these bowls, right? So if you've been a part of the show for a while, you know I normally use the small bowl when we're doing tonight's work on Tuesday nights. It sets your throat chakra, so it's good for that. I normally use the small bowl. And then I have a big solar plexus bowl, big yellow bowl that I would use. But I knew when I started getting these things that I wanted a full, complete set, right? And when I started looking at the prices of those things, I was like, I do not want to spend that kind of money at this point, right? So I was like, I'm just going to wait. I just know how it works for me and manifesting or want some stuff. I can want something, and as long as I remain patient, I generally get it One time it was the first, not the first time, one time that kind of sticks out to me in my mind was Celestine Prophecies. I met somebody and they told me that about how great this book Celestine Prophecies was. And I was like, I want to get it. And I looked it up. It wasn't that expensive, but it was more than I was willing to pay for a book that I don't know much about and only one person ever mentioned to me. So when I looked it up, it was $20. And I was like, I don't want to pay $20. So I waited and then wound up finding it in a Goodwill or something like that for 25 cents. So I know how it works. I can announce what I want, and then I have to be patient and wait for the opportunity to show up, right? So these bowls sat in a cart for years since we started. We've been doing this about 3 years, and I promise you, these bowls have sat in a shopping cart for 3 years total. But then it got down to a price that it would be hard for me to justify not buying them anymore. Knowing that I wanted them, knowing they'd be a benefit to the work that I do, knowing they'd be a benefit to my life itself, right? So when it came down, I bought it. I invested in myself. I got something that I wanted to be at a price where that seemed to make sense to me, and it came there, right? So that is an example of something else coming to fruition. And then the last small example, right, is about some shoes, which is funny because I buy shoes all the time. But for the last 2 years, 2.5 years, maybe even three, definitely 2.5 years, I've been looking for some navy blue dress shoes to replace some of my old navy blue dress shoes. And you'd be amazed how difficult it is to find navy dress shoes, right? Navy dress shoes specifically that make sense to pay that price. So I can find some that were over $100 or 150. You'd be amazed on how much dress shoes cost. If you want comfortable dress shoes, they cost a bunch. And at this point, I really don't be wanting to spend over what I'd pay at Clark's. And Clark's, I can generally get some Clark shoes for about $100, right? Or I get them on sale when it's buy one get one free. So I really ain't want to pay $100, and I was hoping to get it from Clark's or something. And I was looking around for years for some navy blue shoes. So the other day, what is today? Monday, Tuesday, maybe it was Sunday, or maybe Monday. Either way, one of these days I decided I wanted to go and look for some sandals, some flip flops, some house shoes. I found some $10 house shoes that are some of the most comfortable house shoes I've had. So I was like, I'm about to go back and get another pair. So needless to say, I did not find the pair of house shoes that I went to look for. But what I did find is a pair of navy dress shoes that would normally cost over $100, and I found them for 40. I was so excited, and I bought them $40 shoes, even though they weren't what I came, right? So all of this, what's the point? Well, all of this is to remind you that you have the ability to attract the things that you want to your life. You just need to profess it, live your life faithful and hopeful, and then apply the patience as your attraction power start working. So stay focused, don't give up on yourself, and remember, your heart is the most magnetic most magnetic organ that you have. So attract from the heart. So pay attention to the small things, and because they will give you inclination on some bigger things that you've asked for that may be coming to fruition in your life as well. right? So last week, we got sidetracked when the bowls got delivered. Listen, I can tell I haven't been drinking enough water because I've been overly thirsty. So we got sidetracked by the delivery of the bowls, and we enjoyed open those. But this week we are going to begin the assessing of asking ourselves questions to be able to assess how we are functioning within these identity based egos. But last week we started with the discussion around spiritual ego. What is spiritual ego? Spiritual ego is an identity that is built around spiritual knowledge, spiritual experiences, personal growth, healing, awakening, enlightenment, and or consciousness. All the things that we do here. So here we function in our spiritual ego, right? But part of the process or part of the things that we want to make sure that we're clarifying during these discussions. Hey Todd, are you still there? Or you checked in and checked out? Um, So, ego itself isn't bad, but how we function within those egos can be healthy or unhealthy. So, we want to be able to recognize if we are functioning in our healthy ego or unhealthy ego. And spiritual ego is the one that's built around spiritual experiences, spiritual knowledge, personal growth, healing, awakening, enlightenment, and consciousness. Funny thing about spiritual ego is I actually was thinking about it a little bit earlier today. And one of the more interesting things that I've been seeing as I interact with more of the spiritual community or interacting with spirituality in a different way, right? So when I say spiritual community, I mean those people who are spiritual but do not subscribe to a specific religion to shape their spirituality, right? So they do various things, but they have built their own individual connection with the universe, with God, with their ancestors, whoever that they are trying to build a connection with. But one of the more interesting things that I've been noticing that is somewhat of a culture shock and kind of hard for me to wrap my mind around, for lack of better words. I meet a lot of people who have a wealth of spiritual knowledge. They are moving people's hearts. They are moving people's minds. They are doing all types of spiritual work and spiritual healing. But one of the things that I noticed that they have this wealth of spiritual knowledge only to be emotionally unavailable, unaware of how their emotions function and how their emotions lead different various egos to show up in their lives where it does not reflect the spiritual knowledge that they do have, right? So I recognize that having knowledge and applying knowledge are two different things. And the spiritual ego has been very interesting because of how many people function in the spiritual ego but have are emotionally unavailable. It is very weird, and they use their spirituality as a guise for their emotional unavailability. They'll speak this spiritual language, and you'll feel like they are available or they are aware, but that is just spiritual knowledge. That spiritual knowledge does not reflect their emotional healing, their physical healing, or their mental healing, right? So the spiritual ego uses growth to strengthen its identity, right? It makes us feel new and special because we have something that makes us a little bit unique, right? It often forms after genuine breakthroughs, right? Um, Healing from trauma is an example of some breakthrough that you wind up experiencing that winds up bringing strength or bringing about the spiritual ego. Uh, its core function is to simply ask or answer, am I awakened? Or how spiritually advanced am I? Right? So, but the spiritual paradox, the spiritual ego creates somewhat of a paradox. We've talked a lot about paradoxes. The first one we really started discussing was happiness paradox. But as we go on through these egos, we also recognize how they create a paradox, right? So the irony of the spiritual ego is that it uses spirituality to maintain separation. We see this very clearly in religion, and we see this in the spiritual community who do not identify as a religion. These ideas, the spirituality, our connectedness to God, the universe, our ancestors, is what we use to judge people and to create separation. That's the wild thing about the spiritual ego. Although it is about spirituality and connectedness, and the universe is connected into everything. It is used to create separation between the people, right? One of the more important thing, or one of the more interesting things about the spiritual ego is this idea of spiritual bypassing. So, what spiritual bypassing is what I was talking about when I talked about having this spiritual knowledge but being emotionally unavailable, right? So, what spiritual bypassing is when spirituality is used to avoid human reality, to avoid the human experiences, thinking you are above and beyond what happens to us all. What I always like to say when we talk about this is opting out of your own life. We use the example of people who don't date, haven't dated in 10, 15 years. These people are claiming that their spirituality and their peace is more important. But they are doing spiritual bypassing. They're using that to opt out of their own life and avoid the human experience, right? So that was a little bit about the ego. And then we will start with our questionings, right? About the spiritual ego. We're going to go back to the beginning and we're going to discuss. We're going to start assessing survival ego first. So, a reminder, if you're new here, you can go back to Beyond Ego, the first episode, and catch all the egos from identity-based ego to functional-based egos and all those things. So, survival ego, it is, quick reminder, the part of yourself that is focused on safety, security, stability, and self-preservation, right? It helps us meet our basic needs. Survival ego is not good or bad. It's neutral. How we function, and it can be healthy or unhealthy. So survival ego helps us, meet our basic needs. Survival ego helps us to avoid danger. It helps us to protect ourselves from harm. That emotional harm, physical harm, mental harm, spiritual harm. And survival ego is there to help create stability in our lives. If we are functioning healthy in our survival ego, it will keep us grounded and secure. That is what a healthy survival ego does. But if we are functioning a little unhealthy in our survival ego, we see threats everywhere. Everywhere. Those wind up showing up as everything is a conspiracy. Nothing is trustworthy. Everything is suspicious. That's a person that is stuck in their survival ego. They are stuck trying to create a sense of safety for themselves, right? So that's what it is. So now, am I functioning in my survival ego is the question. How do I know? How do I know? So, one, survival ego is about safety. So we can assess by asking ourselves some safety questions, right? So the first question you'd want to ask yourself is, what situations make me feel unsafe, threatened, or vulnerable? What situations make you feel unsafe, threatened, or vulnerable? Or vulnerable. For myself, something that makes me feel threatened and vulnerable, not necessarily unsafe, but unsafe could be in there, is not knowing, right? One of the things I had to do in my own personal life is come to terms and allow myself to be comfortable with not knowing. Not in the sense of knowledge, of knowing, but in the sense of being able to foresee what will happen next, being able to foresee what the outcomes are. So, not being able to forward plan, not being able to see those things, it winds up not knowing. It winds up make me feel a little bit unsafe. Well, not unsafe, threatened and vulnerable because I function a lot in my knowledge ego. So not knowing makes me feel uncomfortable. Now, as it relates to unsafe, the wild thing about it is I really never really thought about unsafe, right? Until I started reshaping my relationship with this idea of safety. And one of the main things I had to reshape my idea, my relationship with safety is as it relates to dating and women, right? One of the things that I was able to communicate clearly when a friend asked me, do I feel safe with them, was no, I don't feel safe with any woman, right? But when I talked about this, I also let everybody know that I did not put that responsibility on women, right? I began to ask myself, why don't I feel safe with women, right? And the answer that wound up resonating with me and giving me satisfaction and bringing me back down to earth and grounded was because I did not look for safety. In my life, I've been in so many unsafe situations, living situations, hanging out situations, that safety almost seemed as though it was an abstract idea. And I never really looked at relationships with people as a safe space. So I recognize one of the reasons I did not feel comfortable with that is because I never looked for safety. Safety wasn't that important. I stayed in some very unsafe. I remember one time I stayed in this neighborhood that they swore had the largest group of MS-13 members in this in this neighborhood, in this apartment complex. And I lived over there every day and didn't think anything about it. I remember I took my homeboy was staying west side, deep west side, that side streets that you gotta be on the west side to mess around. And I had my friend with me. And I knew this neighborhood was a dangerous neighborhood, but I never really thought about it in the sense of safety. So my friend goes with me to my homeboy's place in the hood, and she was scared to get out the car because it felt unsafe to her. And I was like, girl, you better not sit in this car. You better get out. We get out and go. You get out and go with us. You don't want to be sitting in this car with these random people walking around, right? So I learned how to function in dangerous areas that I didn't necessarily need to look for safety. So unsafe was with relationships, but now I recognize that I look for safety. Safety is a requirement in any relationship that I have, whether it be work relationship, whether it be platonic relationships, friend relationships, or romantic relationships, familiar relationships, any type of relationship that you can think of. I definitely now start looking for safety as a main part, right? So the next question you want to ask yourself is, how often do I think about worst case scenarios? How often do you think about worst case scenarios? If you feel comfortable, answer that in the chat. Let us know. How often do you think about worst case scenarios? So for me, um, I don't think I think about worst case scenarios too often, right? So they're not at the forefront of my mind. I do not function in life um, worrying about worst case scenarios because I always shoot for the best, right? I know that's right. Thank you for your honesty. Because the worst case scenario thoughts can be crippling to decision making, right? So for me, how worst case scenarios wind up coming up in my thought process is in planning. So when I'm planning for a goal or anything, I like to think of what I would like, and then I like to think about what is the worst case scenario that it can happen. So as I'm planning, I can try to address some of these things, right? We talk about SWOT analysis. So generally, when I think about worst case scenarios, it's similar to a SWOT analysis. If you are unfamiliar with SWOT analysis, it is SWOT, strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. So generally when I'm working with clients or working with recipients or even when I've been in leadership, we did a lot of SWOT analysis. So for our own life, the only time that I really used to get focused or get the thinking about worst case scenarios is when I'm planning for the future. Now, another way worst case scenarios wind up showing up in my life is when fear arises. When I feel life is a little unstable, right? So I talked about my job, and over the last year, we've been in this contract thing and all this stuff, right? So worst case scenarios pop in my mind during that, right? But the ironic thing about it is these worst case scenarios that pop in my mind now actually allow me to be able to see how much growth I've done. Because previously, before we started this journey, what would wind up happening is my survival would kick in and I'd be stuck on worst case scenarios and making all my decisions based on these fears of what could happen. Will I be homeless? Will I have something to eat? Will I be able to pay my bill? Worst case scenarios. I'm thinking about all these things, all these fears. So when life feels a little unstable, worst case scenarios wind up showing up. But I've been working on my relationship with faith and hope. So when life gives me the opportunity to exercise these new skills or these sharpened tools that I have, not necessarily new skills, but sharpened tools that I have, I utilize them and then I assess if I've grown. So as I've been going through this transition, I didn't worry as much. I really kept reminding whenever that feeling of unsafe came in, I would always remind myself who I am now. I would use some of these affirmations to affirm who I am now. And I would profess what my new relationship is with faith and hope and remind myself how strong faith and hope has shown up in my life to help me, right? So, when you thinking, how often do you think about worst case scenarios? Answering that question will let you know if you are functioning in your survival ego. Next thing you want to ask yourself is, do I need certainty before taking action? You know my answer is about to be yes, right? So again, you feeling comfortable, you want to share with the family, put your answers in the chat as well. So you know my answer is about to be yes. Well, it's not yes anymore. But I just talked about one of the ways that I feel unsafe or when I feel vulnerable or threatened is around not knowing or the certainty of the results. I don't know what the outcome is going to be. So for you, do you need to know before taking action? How this really wound up showing up is in my romantic life. I'd be afraid to go forward, or not even I I'd be afraid to go forward because I did not know what would happen next. And it's funny because I've been talking to a friend, and one of the things that I've been saying to them is I don't want fear to be making my decisions for my life again anymore, right? So in doing that, I am comfortable with not knowing what the outcome is going to be and still being able to take action. I recognize that sometimes we build the ship while we fly, or the fog does not clear until we start walking down the road. So, for me, one of the biggest areas of growth has been around this idea of certainty before I take actions. So, do you need to know? Do you need to be certain before you take action? And it can be as something as simple as calling someone that you like. I have people who do not like to call me because they don't know if I'm going to answer the phone. That is an example of them functioning in their survival ego because they need that certainty, right? And I've had people who have grown from that space where now they don't worry so much about that. Initially, they did, and now they don't. They still call. If I don't answer, they can be patient until I call back, right? So the next thing you want to do is be able to assess your relationship with risk. Survival ego forms itself around risk, right? So when faced with uncertainty, do you become curious or fearful? When faced with uncertainty, do you become curious or fearful? Fearful or curious? Which do you do? So for me, it's kind of a combination of both, right? So I be a little fearful because I'm still working on my relationship with this certainty before I take action. So not having that certainty creates a little bit of fear, right? And that's okay because now I have the tools to transmute or change that fear into something else. As long as I can recognize it and identify it, then I have the ability to be able to change and reshape it, right? So, uncertainty does create a little bit of fear, but my other tools have been sharpened so much where I can dull that fear, right? And the other thing I do is wind up being curious, right? So that curiosity shows itself of as solutions and opportunities. So when uncertainty shows up, I start looking for what message is trying to be sent to me. I'm curious. What does that mean? What does this mean? What message is trying to be sent to me? What new opportunities are the opportunities that I've been taking advantage of? Are they no longer in alignment with who I am or where I'm going? Right? So, do you become curious or fearful with uncertainty? Next, ask yourself, how comfortable am I with change? Listen, how comfortable are you with change? As a person who is, I say I'm a scientist by nature and a teacher by heart. Those are two things that are very, very attached to routine and schedule, right? So I love those things. But when it comes to change, life has given me the opportunity to have a healthy relationship with the change. So when change shows up, I am comfortable with it. One of the things that I say in my consultant work is the only thing consistent is change. Changes all the time. So in the work I've done, I've had to grow to be comfortable with change because it is a normal part of the routine. And in my own life, being a military child growing up, we did a lot of change. I've experienced a lot of change, lived in a lot of different states, lived in a lot of different places. So I experienced change and had to adapt. Those frustrations, that uncertainty, that those fears, all those things that come to play are not overwhelming to me anymore because I've had a lot of opportunity to practice change, right? So for me, I do think that I am comfortable with change. For you, are you how comfortable with change? How comfortable are you with change, right? Do you see change as a threat? I know when I worked with children with reactive attachment disorder, one of the main threats that they would experience was change. Listen, if you want to find yourself restraining a child or one of the kids that you working with just having an off day, do some change. I mean, it could be as simple as when they get up, they brush their teeth, then they take their shower. And I come in and one day I want them to take their shower, then brush their teeth. Blow up. They off. They are uncomfortable with change, period. They don't know what to do. And they're about to make your day a living hell. For real, for real. Oh God, excuse me. So how comfortable are you with change? Next, how do you navigate threats? How do you navigate threats? So when stressed, do you tend to fight or argue? Do you tend to flight or avoid and escape? Do you tend to freeze, shut down, or fawn? People, please. When stressed, what do you do? How do you respond to stress? Um, Depending on the stress, you can get either any one of these, right? Any one of these. Depending on the stress, I'll be more in a space to fight, argue, especially when I feel like my rights or my boundaries or anything like that is being encroached, or I just don't have the emotional availability to be able to navigate people and their emotions. I don't have it. So I wind up arguing things that may or may not need to be argued. Now, again, this is an area of growth, but I do still have the self awareness to recognize that this is one of my shadow attributes, right? I also have the tendency to flight, right? I had a friend recently who was stressing me out with mixed signals, rudeness, and then positive. It was just weird. It was just weird, right? So for me, I just avoided them. And they couldn't understand why I would avoid them. But I would avoid them because their inconsistency, their wishy washiness, all those things seem like a threat to me. So, in that threat, I responded to it because I cannot do what I would normally do to a threat, and that is to get rid of it. So, if I can't necessarily get rid of the threat, then I have a tendency to avoid or escape. Also, depending on what the threat is. or who is making me feel threatened, I can and will shut down. Especially if I am interacting with a person that does not leave space for you to think, feel, and be different than them. I will shut down. I will shut down. If I know you cannot see me as a person, as an individual with his own rights and thoughts and ideas, I have a tendency to just shut down. I'm just not going to discuss this with you anymore because I know learning, understanding, hearing, seeing me is not what you're trying to do. And I don't really care what you're trying to do because those things are important to me. So I'm not aligning myself with what you're trying to do. I'm aligning myself with what I'm trying to do. And if there's not a space for healing, growth, listening, all those things, I do have a tendency to shut down. Now, fawn and people please, on the surface, I would say that I really don't do that, right? But being honest and authentic and vulnerable with myself, I do recognize at some points fear of losing, fear of losing the relationship, the people, fear of you losing the opportunity, or any of those things will help me. I will wind up fawning, people pleasing, right? And that fawn or that people pleasing shows up in a way that I can disguise it or guise it or lie to myself and say that I was being compromising or understanding to other person's plight when really what I was doing was shrinking myself to be more acceptable to the person that I was talking to, right? So, honest vulnerability and transparency, I do recognize how I use understanding and compromise as a guise for my people pleasing behaviors when I start bending and flexing on the things that I want for myself to be more acceptable to the people or places that I'm interacting with. That is a fawning technique. And I do recognize that that's when my survival ego shows up, right? So now that I know that my survival ego shows up in those situations, when I find myself in those situations, that is a sign for me to pause and remind myself that it is okay to say what you want. It is okay to be clear about what you want. You can do that. Right? Brother, so glad to have you with us, man. Glad you could show up this week. We're doing a little bit of assessing right now, family. We're doing the survival ego, and then if we got time, we'll do the image ego. We might not do image ego because it's it's a little bit over an hour, but we'll see how I feel at the end of this. So the next one with survival ego, you want to be able to analyze your relationship with control. How do you feel and interact with control, right? So, first question you want to ask yourself is, how much energy do I spend trying to prevent bad outcomes? How much energy do I spend trying to prevent bad outcomes? If you feel comfortable, answer that in the chat. How much energy do you spend to prevent bad outcomes? Wild thing for me is I don't spend a lot of actionable energy to prevent bad outcomes, right? I try to do that in forethought and being proactive instead of reactive, right? But how that energy shows up can be a little bit different, right? So I can wind up being stuck in fear and thinking about the negative outcomes and stressing myself and trying to prevent those things when fear shows up. So fear winds up being the energy that shows up when I am trying to prevent bad outcomes, right? It's one of the reasons why I say I don't want fear to be making the decisions for me. There's a lot of parts of my body that I recognize used to make decisions for me that I no longer want them to make the decision for me, right? If I'm being honest with myself, I can recognize which parts of me that are making a decision that isn't my heart or my mind or something else, right? So sometimes you got to vote with your feet. You got to vote with your feet. Boop, 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 walk out. You know what I mean? But I do recognize that fear winds up being the space where I spend too much energy trying to prevent bad outcomes, right? So for yourself, how much energy do you spend trying to prevent bad outcomes, right? Next thing you want to ask yourself is, do I struggle when things don't go according to plan? Do you struggle when things don't go according to plan? A little bit. A little bit. I always say this little thing where it say you want to see God laugh, tell him your plans, right? So that statement right there gives me an understanding that things don't always go according to plan. In my work life, I've done construction. If you've ever had to do some construction, whether it's in your personal life or your work life or whatever life you live in, you know construction timelines have a tendency to go longer than planned, right? So dealing with that, I recognize that I always need a space for flexibility because things don't go according to plan. Things don't go according to plan, right? So all that thing is the understanding that I have, right? But internally, when things do not go according to plan, it is like the water is on fire inside of me, right? I feel it burning. I feel it's all types of energetic energy that is going ham sandwich on the inside of me, right? Because especially when I think that my plans are clear and should be obtainable, right? I always have that. I have this moment where I can think that simple should be easy. But through this, we've clearly been able to learn that simple does not always mean easy. We ask simple questions during this show, but the answers can be very complex, can be layered, and not easy. Anything but simple, right? So, when things don't go according to plan, I struggle a little bit because although I'm accepting of it not going short the plan, there's still an emotional process I have to go through to get there because internally, ooh, it's a party. You dig? It is a party. So next, when it comes to survival ego, you want to assess how you function with the ideas of scarcity versus trust. That scarcity is a wild one, right? So, do you generally trust that your needs will be met? Do you generally trust that your needs will be met? So, this is one that I kind of waffle back and forth on. So, I do think that my needs will be met, but I also think that these needs will only be met based on the work that I put in, right? And one of the things that I have to use to remind myself that that's not necessarily true is that the birds are provided for, the trees are provided for, and the provisions are there for us always, where we do not have to worry about our needs being met. We do not have to worry about that our needs being met. So, one of the things I had to do is reshape my relationship with trust. Not necessarily trust with other people, but trust in myself. Trust the that when my intuition speaks, that I can listen to it. So when my intuition is telling me, don't worry, it's going to work out, it will be fine, I need to allow that emotion to take over. And then the feelings or the stories that I tell myself need to be stories that align with everything is going to be okay. I trust myself. I make good decisions. I make good actions. These are the things that you want to be able to be able to identify when you are talking about your relationship with trust and your needs being met, right? Next question you want to ask is, am I often, operative word there is often, worried about not having enough? There was a point in my life where that was a thought all the time. And right now, I don't really think about that, except for old age. I do worry that in my later years, will I have enough to survive and thrive? Well, if I decide to work or if I decide to do whatever, it is my choice, not because I have to. I don't want to be one of those people that's working to the day they die or working themselves to death, right? I don't want to be that, right? So, how often do you worry about having enough? I don't really, because I am blessed with enough. And I live in a space of gratitude for recognizing that I do have enough, except for when it relates to old age. So for yourself, do you often worry about having enough? The last thing that you want to be able to assess as it relates to your survival ego is your relationships, your emotional relationships, right? So, first question you can ask yourself is, can I be vulnerable without feeling completely exposed? Can you be vulnerable without be feeling completely exposed? Can you? For me, the answer is no. I cannot be vulnerable without feeling completely exposed, right? But the ironic thing about that, or the interesting thing about that is, I'm comfortable with being vulnerable and completely exposed. So, although I feel those things together, I am comfortable with vulnerability and being exposed, right? And maybe it's parts of exposure that I haven't experienced yet that I might be uncomfortable with. But this whole process of soul swami and Reiki and sharing and healing has me being vulnerable and transparent to help build an energy or create a space where other people can be vulnerable and transparent. I have to be those things, right? And once I am vulnerable, I move those walls or those guards, I am exposed. And one of the reasons I am vulnerable is because I want to be exposed. I want to be able to be seen. And to be seen, you have to be vulnerable and allow yourself to be exposed. So many of us want to be seen. We want to be seen, but we have these walls and these guards so high that we're always asking, why can they not see me? But we're never asking, Why are these walls so high that no one can see me? We don't create the space to be seen, right? So, in survival, that's what that is. You're protecting yourself from being vulnerable and or exposed. So, can you be vulnerable without feeling completely exposed? Or are you like me? It's a combination of both. And you need to shape a relationship where you feel comfortable being vulnerable and exposed. Vulnerable and exposed. I invite you into my house every week. You get to see what's important to me. You get to see how I work on projects and what's valuable. You get to see my growth. You get to see my mistakes. All those things we discuss on these things. So, comfortable being vulnerable without feeling exposed? No. But I'm comfortable being vulnerable and exposed. I'm all right with that, right? One of the reasons a lot of people don't join the show is because they're fear of being exposed and vulnerable. They're afraid that the world might see that they are not who they portray themselves to be. And that's all right. Because one of the purposes we do on here is to remove the mask so we can be our authentic self. We want to be the same person in all situations. We don't want to live in that fear, right? So, the next question you want to ask yourself is, can I stay present with difficult emotions? Can I stay present with difficult emotions? That means, can you be present with anger? Can you remain present with sadness? Can you remain present with grief? Can you remain present with difficult emotions, right? So, prior, I would say no. Because honestly, I was addicted to several different forms of escapism, whether it was food, whether it was alcohol, or anything like that. I tap into escapism. And I would disguise that escapism as having fun or doing something I enjoy. But really, what it was to numb some of these difficult emotions that I carried with every day. I didn't give myself permission to be able to feel the spectrum of feelings and emotions that we go through as humans. I tried to align myself with what a man feels, whatever that means, right? So I struggled to stay present. When worry showed up, I'd listen. You can always know if you was one of my friends that I'm going through, I'm dealing with difficult emotions because I would be invisible. You would know what? Like, I ain't seen this dude in months. You all right? I'm processing difficult emotions, and I definitely escape, disappear. Solitude was a major tool to allow me to avoid sitting with difficult emotions, right? I just escape, you know what I mean? Because therefore I don't have to talk about it. No one has to worry about it. I don't have to explain it. I can just wait and navigate it until it's over, right? But currently, I've reshaped my relationship with being able to sit with difficult emotions. I don't do many of the escaping things that I would do before, right? Um, One of the things that on this show is just being a healthiest version of ourselves, and that is removing some of those escapist tools that I use to help me shoulder difficult emotions. So, no drugs, no alcohol, no healthy diet, all those things. I consciously made sure that I separate how I cope from how I celebrate, because they used to be the exact same thing. I would celebrate with the same things that I did to cope. But now I don't do those things to cope. I do them to celebrate. So when I celebrated the contract, I got a drink. When I'm stressed about the contract, I don't drink. Right? So ask yourself, can you stay present with difficult emotions? Can you still be able to hear, see, feel, give, receive, all those things while you are dealing with difficult emotions? Difficult emotions. Um, I can definitely say that a lot of the people I work with, this is why they come to me. They're dealing with difficult emotions and they want to be able to be present still in their lives as they deal with difficult emotions. I had a friend call me the other day and asked me to if I could do a session for a group that she's a part of. And specifically, one of the things that she felt the group needed was around this idea of being present with difficult emotions. These people need to know that it is okay with not being okay. It is okay, but like, I'm not okay. This shit sucks. Instead of pretending like you're okay. I'm one of those people, if you ask me if I'm okay, you better be serious. Because I'm going to tell you. And you might not want to hear all that. So you ask me, you better be serious. Because I'm going to tell you. Right? So I do see that this is a path that leads a lot of people to me. They recognize that they cannot be present with those difficult emotions. So they look for tools to help them navigate them or help sharpen the tools or the stuff that they use to be able to sit with difficult emotions. So last question again is, can you stay present with difficult emotions? Difficult emotions. So family, that is our assessment for, okay, I got my steps in. Whoop, whoop, whoop. That is our assessment for the survival ego. So if you're feeling like sharing, put in the chat if the survival ego, these assessments taught you that you function in your survival ego in an unhealthy way or a healthy way. Let me know. Let me know. So next week we will do the image, a status ego, and the knowledge ego, depending on if we have time. Thursday, we're going to do something a little bit different. So I don't quite know what book club is going to change into, but just know it's changing and reshaping. So book club is cool. It will still be a part of what we do. It just cannot have its own sole day every week just for me to read, right? So reading will still be a part of the process, but I don't know what I want to do. So we're going to talk about a couple of answers, a couple of options and ideas, and I want you to let me know what you think. So join us Thursday as we revamp or revitalize book club. And if you can't make it Thursday, I hope to see you back here Tuesday as we continue assessing how we are functioning within these identity-based egos. So family, I want you to know I appreciate your time. I appreciate your energy. I appreciate you being here. You can be anywhere in this world, but you are here with us, evolving, growing, and healing. And for that, I say thank you. And with that, I will say peace to you, family. Again, I appreciate you, and I'll see you Thursday. So Peace.